all sit around in different jobs in this business. What is a producer and what is your job exactly to do? Ethan, if that's somebody there, make sure you let them in. Thanks.
So the producers are the ones who write the newscasts that you see on TV when you turn on the news. They write the intros that the anchors say. They don't write the packages, but they write the scripts for any voiceovers that you see, VOSOTs. That's all written by them. They pick what video they want, and they get to arrange the stories, and pretty much all the backbones of it is created by the producer.
Interesting, and I guess that's why, and I'm not gonna talk down to any newscasters, but that's sometimes why you would almost call it a talking head, is because literally they're reading your words that a lot of times you've written down. How much input do the anchors have into your sort of your production?
I don't want to say they don't have any input, because we do have these meetings with everyone, gets to sit around and decide what will happen. But I think a lot of it is up to the producer, and of course the leadership too, with the executive producers and the other managers have a say on what goes and what doesn't go to an extent. But a lot of it is the producer creating. Basically, you have your own show. You have most of your own reign to do what you want. You get to pick how you want the stories to flow and the arrangement and everything. There is a general template basically for the rundown, whereas weather goes in a certain spot. But other than that, you get to stack it how you want.
So you're
a lot of freedom.
Are you as well the one that then picks the news stories that we're going to be getting covered in that day? And when you pull those, do you pull them just from? When I was in school, it was just called The Wire, the Associated Press. Is that still where we're pulling things from?
We do use the AP a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm actually learning. I started to learn how to produce about a month ago.
Okay.
So I'm still new to it. I was hired as an assignment editor. That's what I mainly do.
Okay.
So it's the assignment editors pick what stories are done for
Okay,
the
so
day.
please explain that. Explain that
So-
exactly out. So before being the producer, you were an assignment editor. Please explain exactly what that job is, so that everybody here has a greater understanding of what that job entails if they wanted to go into that.
Yeah, so the assignment editors, we find the stories, we manage the news tip line. We get a lot of people calling the news tip line. So I answer the phone. We have emails that we get where people send in their tips. We monitor a lot of Facebook pages and whatnot to see what people are talking about. The scanners, you probably don't.
Police scanners.
You probably
No,
don't listen to scanners here, do you?
Well, I actually do. They, in case you kids don't know, there's an app out there just on your iPhone that you can just zone in and just listen to those police scans and stuff like that.
Okay.
My mom showed me it, and I've been hooked on it ever since.
Okay, so that's the background noise all the time, the scanners going off. So we listen if there's any big events going on, like a big fire, like a second or third alarm fire, we would probably send somebody out to. But of course you listen, you hear all of the calls though. So you hear when somebody has a stubbed toe and they call 911 and that kind of thing.
Sure do.
So basically though, I guess to make that into a metaphor, we kind of weed out everything that we see going on, and that's what the assignment editor does to find what's actually newsworthy. So we follow stories and decide if, what reporter, photographer, both, whatever, we're going to send out to cover that story. And then they'll come back and create like a package for the day, and they might get some video that they shoot, which might just be a voiceover where the anchor's like speaking over it on the newscast, or it might be a VOSA where we get sound from people that we interview. Could be any of those things that they get, but the assignment editor basically just finds the stories, finds what's actually newsworthy to cover, and then we send the crews out to cover those things. Sometimes the stories don't pan out, and whatever, we have to redirect, but that's mainly what the assignment editor does.
That sounds like a really good job. That's an important job, because you're the person then, because again, in my mind, the bread and butter of all local news is local news for the local news stations. Yeah, you're gonna hit your beats on national news. Yeah, you're gonna hit your beats on weather, but I mean, sports is, you're gonna hit national sports, but it's the local sports, it's the local news. And I think that's something that's really important for any student that's part of this program to understand, is local matters. And in the case of this high school, anybody that's tuning into HASD broadcast cares about the high school-based news, and that's why it becomes a microcosm of something like a WNEP. And so that's the thing that assignment editors do. That's great. So now in production, now that you're on that producer side of things, continue to tell me more about what are the new things that you're doing as you've expanded your wings into that territory.
New how?
Well, so you said you've done the assignment editing stuff, and now you're starting to officially, and over the last months, transition into being a producer. Is there anything you would say to the town? So like you said you're writing the script still. Are you still picking stories as a producer, or is that just something that, again, is kind of in the team meeting, and is there a new assignment editor underneath you, or how
No,
does that work?
I'm still the newest one, so I'm still working as an assignment editor,
Okay.
but they're kind of like also teaching me other things like cross-training, basically, me to also produce. But how the producers pick their stories, though, so I explained about the assignment editors actually picking the stories to send people out to cover. There's a meeting every day where the producers for all the evening newscasts, they sit around the table, and the assignment editors or assignment manager puts together what we call a story sheet of all the available stories, and then we go around the table, and like the 6 o'clock producer gets to say, okay, so I want that story in my newscast, and then like the 5 o'clock will pick and whatever.
Okay.
And the different producers producing a different newscast will pick what stories that they want to go into their half hour or hour show or whatever. So they pick their stories from what is available that we covered that day, that the assignment desk picked out to kind of cover that day. And then the producers also have under their belt, we have, so WNEP is an ABC affiliate. So any kind of national coverage that we would get, that would come from our other ABC stations or like the headquarter ABC. So like you talked about The Wire from the Associated Press. We do have available to us the Associated Press as well, but for ABC, that network's called like ABC News 1, and we have a login, and we could pull any stories from like Good Morning America is an ABC affiliate, so we could pull like something that they did that morning. We could pull from other ABC stations, and then we're also, our owner is a company called Tegna, so we have Tegna affiliates. So we have like Fox 43 is a Tegna station in Harrisburg.
I was gonna say, I didn't know where that was. Okay,
Yeah, so it's in Harrisburg. So if there's a story that might be of interest to, people around Pennsylvania, but they covered because they covered the capital,
Sure,
so it's
capital
easier
stuff.
for them to do that kind of thing. So we could pull a story from there. 'Cause they'll have all these different like news conglomerates, or whatever you want to call them.
Do you guys still have a satellite campus out, I want to say, in the Stroudsburg area? I felt like you guys at one point were building almost like a satellite station out there.
Yeah, so I work at our main station is in Moosic outside of Scranton, but we do have a Poconos newsroom, they call that, in Stroudsburg. I think it's right along like Main Street, or one of those main streets in Stroudsburg. They have another station there. There's a Wyoming Valley newsroom in Wilkes-Barre off of Public Square.
Okay.
So we have there are different little headquarters where people can work. I'm in the main one, where we, like when you turn on the news and watch, like the anchors at the anchor desk, they're coming from the Scranton newsroom where I work, yeah.
So this may be, I don't know if this is an assignment editor or a producer thing. How, especially nowadays in 2022, in our increasingly hyper-politicized time, I imagine a lot of news tips and a lot of things that you're getting feed in from the things that you're getting tips on become increasingly politicized. How do you walk the line of that and always be able, is it a meeting, are you the one picking the verbiage to because I mean, I imagine optics and the words matter, especially whenever there's anything of any political thing. The most clear one is the most voting thing that just happened in Pennsylvania, and the whole Bognet-Cartwright thing is how close that whole thing was. So how do you guys walk that narrow path to not alienate either side? And I guess I'm saying ethics matters and your reputation matters. How do you walk that line?
Yeah, that's a tough question. That's a little bit above where I'm at on the totem pole.
Okay.
But I know with the election that we just had, before it even got to that point, in the months leading up to it, we did not cover any political stories because the politicians are campaigning, for months and months and longer than that. So there was some point in the summer where, I don't know, some manager above me called it that, okay, we could start covering some of these things because because a lot of times politicians will do, I don't know, little like community events and whatnot. And we have to be careful that we don't cover that and make it look like we're endorsing a certain candidate. And then kind of level it out too, where one of the campaigns reached out to us about covering, I think it was Jim Bognet, reached out to us about covering him going to vote. So then we had to go out and find Cartwright if he was going to vote in person and cover that.
And
just
that's a great way of handling
level it out and being balanced about kind of giving coverage to, if we're doing one candidate to another candidate.
That seems a fair way of doing things, sure.
But yeah, politics does create a big headache because it's, how people act around that, it's
exactly.
hard.
And that's the thing that I've really been trying to express to the kids here is that's why you have to not show bias ever. Like, and I hear it out of students during the day, and it's fine in class when you hear one side or the other, but it's incredibly important to know that you're basically a scientist, and it's your job to give the truthful fact of science. You're reporting it to the audience who you owe the entire truth to. And one of the test questions is, do you owe it to your director, do you owe it to your producer, or do you owe it to the audience to tell the truth? And it's the audience that you owe to tell the truth to. So let's move from that, on that ethics and truth-telling thing, to where my mother's category is, which you knew as an instructor of yours at one point, the Society of Professional Journalists. Were you part of that at any point?
I was, thanks to your mother. She tried to revitalize our chapter at Bloomsburg, so that's how I got involved. But I'm not anywhere near as involved as your mother is.
Sure.
But we do in journalism school, if you could call it that at Bloomsburg, but in my classes, we did learn about the SPJ Code of Ethics and following that. Like, big part of that is to, seek the truth and report it, and a whole bunch of other things that really anyone doing news should follow. That's an industry standard, and we follow that at WNEP as well. And yeah, there's just a lot of ethics just that should be in your backbone.
No, exactly, and I fully support and agree with that. And my concern is, in the world, I don't think local newscasts have been as affected by politics as much as maybe national news broadcasts. And one of the difficult questions that I would get asked by a student is, if I were to watch TV for like national news, like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, out of all the options I have, which one can I trust? And it's like, gulp. That's how I feel about it. And I say everybody has some bias now, and unfortunately there's blocks of television that are supposed to be news, and then there's areas that get to opinion, and then there's some shows that are just tabloid media. It's there to stir.
Yeah,
so,
a lot of it tries to sell itself off as news, but it's really political commentary.
They're using a set that feels like news, but then they're just saying what they want to say.
Yeah, because it could look like this, and you think, oh, it's news,
Correct.
but it's people just rattling off what they want. So luckily, at the local level, we get to swim past a lot of that because we are reporting local news, not what's going on more politically. But yeah, I mean, it's a concern. People still call in all the time and complain that we're this way or that way.
I'm sure you're always, but I bet you get accused of being both. Like, I'm pretty confident that there's going to be people, especially something like WNEP, from somebody that really is big on ethical reporting of journalism. I don't think I've ever seen WNEP do anything that was biased, as opposed to on the local level. And this is a different area, and I don't know why and maybe you can give me an answer on it, but I don't know why it's such a flexible field. Talk radio, like if we were to say WLK News Radio is not news radio, it's opinion radio. So I don't know why there's that ethical branch that just seems to go far left on that, or right, whichever way you want to go. But I would say on the local level, other than any of the news stations, whether it's you guys, whether it's BRE or WYOU, it doesn't really matter. You should be able to trust the news that you're getting from them.
Yeah, trust is very important because once that trust is perceived as broken by viewers, like, you could lose them forever. People, that's very valuable to people, is that trust between the media and the audience, and it for a lot of people it's already been broken, but a lot of that's just kind of what's going on in the political sphere too. But yeah, I don't know. I noticed that too about radio. Seems to be.
I don't know
radio,
why that.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not much older than these students, but just in the last so many decades, it seems like radio kind of broken. It's kind of broken off from news. Like, it's not very newsy now.
It is. Yeah, it seems. Yeah.
It's more just talk, like you said, and somehow TV has maintained that news-likeness.
Some integrity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you went to Bloomsburg University. Can you talk to us about what your academic experience was like? Would you recommend Bloomsburg University? You can be honest. I don't care. If you think Bloomsburg's terrible, you're allowed to say it. You can't say Pat was terrible. But other than that, you can caca on anybody else.
Mom was awful.
What?
Just kidding. Yeah, well, I didn't go into college knowing that I wanted to do this.
Okay.
So I went for like a lab science degree at first, which I quickly was like, oh, that's not for me. It definitely wasn't for me. So then Bloomsburg is kind of just where I ended up. But I think, like, in this studio here, this is great. We worked with a similar sort of setup at Bloomsburg and in our TV studio. And, we worked with like different cameras. We learned how to do the sound. We practiced doing stuff like this. We all had to direct our own shows, and that's all great practice for actually working in the field. And Bloomsburg is currently redoing their whole media studios. They're building an all new TV station and all new radio station, and they're supposed to have a hub of where all that stuff could work together. So
cool.
I don't know. I mean, it's not supposed to be done for a couple years, but probably when it's done, I would probably recommend at least checking it out. But yeah, I think anywhere that you could go to learn and work with people and get the actual hands-on experience, I would recommend doing that.
As somebody who's in that area, is there a lot of, like, I know there's obviously journalism departments all over the state and all over the nation. Is there a degree from a certain school in particular that WNEP seems to direct itself towards? Like, oh, they came from up at Rutgers because I think they had a good journalism program, or something like an NYU for something. Like, are they fishing for something in particular?
I don't know if they're actually fishing. I mean, they hired me. My degree's from Bloomsburg.
Yeah.
I would just say that there's like a lot of people. So there's a fair number of people who went to Penn State and that went to Syracuse. And I think that's just because those are sort of like bigger schools to go to that have good programs where, like, if you want to do that, you might end up there just because you're attracted to the program, and then now you're looking for a job and it just happens that you're hired. But there's a lot of people from those schools, but I don't want to say that they're necessarily just looking for grads from those schools, because I think as long as you have a good skill set, you got a degree, you have a good skill set, and you're confident in what you can do, I think you have a pretty good chance. And then also Luzerne County Community College, there's a fair number of people that I work with as well who got degrees from there, because from my understanding, they have a really good program in broadcasting or the audio-visual type stuff there. So there's also a good chunk of those people too.
Do they ever bring anybody up directly? And I this is just more, I think, for everybody here to realize. Do you see a lot of kids coming up out of, like, say, the Wilkes-Barre Area Career Center or like the Hazleton Area Career Center or any of the other areas that are like out of the high school level immediately into WNEP? Or is it pretty much the right path to just college it and then try to get it out of there?
I know there was one photographer that we had who just left, but he worked there for a good 3 years. They hired him when he was 18 and he was in school still. He went to LCC, and I don't know how he swung that, but they did hire him when he was still in school.
Okay, so there are paths there. If you are talented, you might be able to get noticed there if you put together a good enough reel and you actually can demonstrate that you have the skill sets.
Yeah, I think like a lot of times now they'll say that they want a 2 or 4 year degree, but you'll also notice on those job postings that it'll say or equivalent experience.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to say don't get a degree, but I think that your experience and what you can do has a lot of value. But on the other hand, too, there's a lot of people who go to college and get a degree, but they don't really spend their time well in college, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like they don't do stuff like this.
Yes.
Like they aren't producing things.
They show up in their seat fillers a lot of times.
Yeah.
And
then,
I've had college students like that as well.
Yeah, and I a lot of my classmates were like that. And it was just almost kind of laughable because you'd go around at the beginning of the semester and the instructor would, you know, have us introduce ourselves and say like what your goal is. And so many people would say like, oh, like I want to work for like Fox Sports, or I want to work for the NHL, or I want to be a reporter or something. So you would think, okay, so you're probably going to go to some games that we have here at the school and announce or work in the, you know, the back end of how they put a broadcast on for a game, or maybe you're going to, you know, act like a reporter and film things and get on camera. And then so often, like 90% of those people who said they wanted to do those things didn't do those things. And then they wonder why when they're out, they're having so much trouble finding a job, which I'm not saying if you do those things that you won't have a hard time, because a lot of people do have a hard time pushing through. But when you do those things, it's so much easier, and it's better experience too for if they do hire you, you're not having such of a shock as to what's going on. So I think having this class in high school is definitely a great start.
It gets your reps in.
It definitely, yeah. And I'm sure these students have some content already. If you were to say, like, just pretend to put something together to put out, you already have some stuff. Because if you do want to be like a talent that's on camera, you're going to want to have a reel for TV. Like a TV, you would want a reel of just showing how you appear on camera. And then if you want to be like a director or a producer, you're going to want to show a reel of, okay, this is what I directed, and you know, this is how I went or whatnot. Because those things really help. I think that's super important too. You can't just sit in a class and get your degree and not have that stuff too. In this field, it's really important. You need the hands-on experience.
I agree 100%. Speaking of students, we have several students here. Roy, do you have any questions or follow-ups on things that you've heard here so far?
I do. You said that going back to the producing time that we were talking, that you were talking, and that you mentioned that there is different producers for different times of the day. How does that work together?
We come to school and we just have it's just basically one segment. That TV news is a 24-hour sort of thing. I'm sorry, I'll let you explain. But
no, that's great. Sorry,
TV news is a 24-hour thing. So some people have to be there getting ready, prep for the morning show. Some people have to prep then for the afternoon news. Then people have to prep for the night news. Then people have to prep for the late night news. So you can't just be at work 24/7. So there's shifts the same way there would be in a factory. I hate to say it that way, but there's different sectors of workforces. So you might be in charge of producing, say, the morning or afternoon or something like that, or segments of the morning or segments of the afternoon. Does that make sense? Am I correct on that or no?
Yeah. So
I didn't live it, so that's
No, that's great. So at our station, we have morning newscasts from like 4:30 to 6, and then there's like some at 7 or 8 or whatever. So that's one person produces that. Like they come in overnight and they do all of that. And then there's a person for a noon broadcast, and then there's a 4 and 4:30 show that usually whoever does the 4 also does the 4:30 for the most part. And then there's a 5 and 5:30. That's a different person. There's a 6, there's a 7, there's a 10, and there's an 11. And usually something that I didn't even fully realize until I started working there is that when you see the news at 5 and 6, like these are different, like it's not the exact thing like over again. Because when you think about it, then what is the point of even having different ones? You could just play it back or whatever. So there are different people that do those things, and it does take a decent amount of like time and effort to put together like even a half hour newscast, and then to working up into that point when it goes live, things could change too, and there could be like a big plane could crash or something, and then you're gonna want to put that in your show in some way. So you always have to be adaptable to change it too, and have a lot of like just like in the moment sort of flexibility, I guess. So yeah, so there's different people for different shows.
And like this is something that I've always like thought about, that how do they do this, because you know they must to adapt like very fast for these situations. But like for some breaking news, how does that work? Like do they get it from somebody, like a breaking news like somebody died or something like the, well, no, God forbid, but if the president
So how does a
dies,
scenario like that play out for you?
Yeah,
Have you
how
ever
would
been
that,
have you ever been in the storm like that?
how would that play out?
So yeah, well, I guess the closest thing to that I can think of is when the Queen died. I mean, that's not really it was more of a world thing. But I mean, if it's more of a high scale thing like that, that's not in our area, we would probably pull from like ABC or something. So that's another thing is our affiliate ABC, almost every day they'll have these live special reports that our station, which is more the news director's decision, like the higher up people, they get to choose whether or not we'll take that report. So I remember the Queen when she died, and I was in the control room line producing the shows for the morning. We had to stop our broadcast and take the special report that ABC was doing for the Queen's funeral, because that was a big deal for some reason.
What's a big deal?
He covered the story. He got very
very
emotional.
Oh,
Really got
okay.
very emotional. When the Queen passed, he had to do a special report on
I
it.
did have some.
Okay, well, a great example then, yeah. But if it was something like here, so let me think. There was a plane, a small plane that crashed in Luzerne County about a month ago, and when that happened, that was on a weekend. That was after my shift, though, luckily, so I didn't have to get into the craziness of that. But what they would do is they like sent a reporter down right away to do a live shot out there and just report on what we knew, which wasn't a lot. But they also could have broken into the news programming and just went live if they wanted to do that. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
it's sort of, I don't know. But behind the scenes, though, usually, yeah, like somebody will be sent out to get whatever they can in footage, and when an emergency happens or something like that, or for usually for a later newscast that day. But if it was something like really, really huge, we could break in and just go live. So I know some of the old people don't like if that happens and their soap opera is interrupted at like 3 in the afternoon or something. But that's always a possibility, sort of. It just kind of depends. Like, it's kind of like touch and
Depends on
go
the
kind of thing.
situation.
Like, yeah, like you kind of assess how it is, and then usually it's a lot of higher up people making those sort of decisions. But everyone else, all the crews and everyone in the control room and everything has to be ready to like go whenever somebody does make that decision. So that could be kind of exciting, but it's sort of everyone works as a team and figures those things out.
Any other ones, Roy?
No.
Brian?
Kind
What do we got, Brian?
so there's a law right there. Give me 1 second.
He's framing the question.
Give me 1 second.
We got it here. The wheels are spinning. Smoke's coming out the
So in the
ears.
state of Pennsylvania, there's a law where you need consent to record.
Yes.
So how does that work?
So the second party consent.
Yeah.
So you, what exactly?
I guess he's asking
Like
how
interviewing.
when
like
you
if
interview somebody, do you ever get waivers? You don't have to do waivers for the news. It's an implied consent when you're filming, right?
Yeah, I don't think.
Especially for a
anyone's-
newscast, it's implied consent because you see the TV camera
Yeah,
with
it's-
16 on it.
But usually, they will act like the reporters, photographers, if they're going to interview somebody, they will like ask them if that's okay that they could interview them. But stuff like perp walks or like, which is somebody's like in handcuffs, like leaving I don't know, like a police station or something. Like they'll film that. I don't
Well,
really
I think
know.
I think
don't really
filming
know
that
what-
is you're filming the act of a
and-
crime.
and
That's actually
that's-
just news coverage at that
yeah,
point.
and that's sort of I don't want to. I don't know. I would assume that's more of a public space.
You'll have a
but-
legal team that will be able to answer that question very easily at WNEP. I'm sure there's somebody on the books there that could answer that question. Like, yeah, here's the exact lines for the exact same rule that, there's a lot of things that I don't necessarily know the rules of that if I had to go check, I might have to go check them with like Mrs. Herman up in the office. So, but yeah, there are certain consent things. Is there ever anything with like I would imagine filming with minors? That's something that's got to get a consent thing immediately.
That's more of a delicate sort of thing, yeah, with the
Yeah.
minors. I'm not sure exactly, honestly, because I'm not really out in the field either. But yeah, like we wouldn't want to go shoving like a microphone in anyone's face. That's especially the situation too. Like what kind of thing is it? But that's another can of worms too. But usually, if you're going to like a parade or something, and there is a guardian, a parent or guardian of somebody, so you could kind of sniff that situation out. But these are all legitimate questions, though. To wonder, I don't have all the answers to all of it, but that is something.
good question.
That is something to consider. Yeah.
So Skycam 16 used to be this wonderful helicopter that you guys had, and I don't believe that you guys do that anymore. You've moved on to drones now, right?
Yeah, we have Skycam 16 as a drone.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yep, there used to be a helicopter years ago. That's no longer. So yeah,
I imagine
we
it's much more cost effective to send the drone out in the field than to fly a helicopter to wherever you need to go. Although, if you needed to get somewhere very, very quickly, flying in the helicopter will get you there much faster than having to drive and take the drone with you.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Interesting. So that's also one of the reasons why in this class, one of the little objectives that we try to get across, and it'll be in the spring when I eventually get that. I'll bring my drone in for the seniors only, and we'll fly that around a little bit just to get a little bit of training on that, because I think that's a good thing to have in your back pocket if you're entering into this field, to be like, oh yeah, no, I can fly drones too. and all
Oh
that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
drones are like the next big thing. Yeah, and that's I know the chief photographer wants me to do the training so I could be what's called
FAA certified.
Yeah, like a certified. I forget the name for it.
There's a certified drone
But
pilot
like a
license.
certified, even just a
UAV,
visual
unmanned
visual
aircraft.
observer, like
Okay.
like a
That's important too, yeah.
visual observer. There's a whole set of rules with drones. I had no idea.
There is
was a thing
many, yeah.
until I went out with the photographer one night for a football game, because we have a very small sports department. It's super small, and they do that Super 16 sports countdown thing. So we try to go go out to as many games as we could. So I volunteered to go help shoot some games. So when I went out with the photographer, he was like, "Oh, this is a great chance now for me. I could get a drone shot of the field because you always need somebody to be the visual observer."
So in other words, it's your job
I
to
was-
watch the drone while he's watching what the camera shot is, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the FAA has all these kinds of rules with it.
You're flying over children.
And yeah, so there's a whole set of rules which I had no idea if you're flying a civilian drone.
Yeah, it's a
So-
big, especially for what you guys are doing, which is commercial broadcast kind of stuff, there is some looser rules on, like, so I teach actually this over at Penn State as well. It's not drone flying, but it's emerging technologies where we talk about drones, virtual reality, and augmented reality, and how those are some of the major keys to the future. With drones, there's something called the DJI Mavic Mini that is 249 grams, and 250 grams is the exact line of what you have to get a license for.
Okay.
So they have a 249 gram one that you don't, as long as you're not filming for broadcast, if I'm filming for anything I want at all, you're allowed to have it as a hobbyist. Like, you don't need a license, you just basically need to slap a sticker on it that you registered it. But other than that, there are some ones that are good for students to get, like, and they're not even expensive, they're under $500 nowadays. And DJI is the brand. I'm sure your drone is a Phantom or something like that, or one of those really cool DJI ones. But there is opportunity for that kind of stuff in the industry as well. Just for what she said is very important to understand. If you are filming for broadcast, so if we were doing something, say we did go out to a football game, and I'm down there flying the drone and watching my shot, legally, there's supposed to be an observer, and you can get in trouble if. I don't think that there's a lot of people going out to, like, FAA police to see who's doing what with drones. Like, I don't think that's happening, but we are one or two major drone accidents away from that starting to happen, or people starting to call and be like, I don't think this drone is safe, because, you know, we've had drones fly into planes and planes have had to make emergency landings. We've had drones go and try to fly over restricted military space because they want to see what's over in Area 51. So you can't do a lot of things with drones that you think you might want to do. So there's maps of, like, where you're allowed to fly and where you're not allowed to fly. DJI has it pretty much all built into the system. But I love drone tech, and I think that is something that's really important for the future of especially news and broadcast. Does WNEP have, and I would imagine probably not, but I'll be shocked if you say yes, any sort of forward thinking towards, like, virtual and augmented reality of any kind? All right, like, I'm sure you guys have the app now, so I don't know what else. As forward thinking, I was like, okay, you guys having your own app is great. I think the next step is, how do people start, when they start consuming information this way, how are we getting to that?
Oh yeah, and I haven't heard any conversations around that, but that's an interesting thing to think about.
I just know, like, again, for the most part, you guys are a cable news and a broadcast over the airwaves news station. I can't imagine a very large audience is still getting, not AM, UHF, VHF, what is that? The over the radio frequencies? I can't imagine a lot of people are popping up
probably not.
antennas to get you anymore. So I imagine most of the consumer market is going to be through a cable line. But you guys still have the way of, I could watch WNEP from my phone on an app. So that's the next way that I can kind of plug into it.
That's the new thing they're pushing. Is the Roku Fire TV
See,
and
that's it.
WNEP Plus.
So that's important. So they are starting to get there. That Roku and the Fire TV stuff, I think, will eventually plug into the virtual reality and augmented reality systems, because at the end of the day, all you're going to be doing with these things are pulling up Netflix, pulling up Hulu, or pulling up your Roku, or pulling up whatever the other account is, and you're just going to be viewing it that way remotely from your cell phone that's streaming it to your augmented or virtual reality glasses. I was just curious to see if the station was doing anything in prep for that, and it sounds like with the app they're at least starting to head that way.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, who knows what they're planning. But
Gentlemen in the audience, do you guys have any questions? We have a microphone here if you do. Ethan, anything? How about anybody in production, backstage? Is there anything you'd like to blare out at us from the microphone? They're not even there. Sophie? That's okay. Roy, do you have any other follow-up questions?
No, I think she answered the ones that
I think we hit a lot of really good beats just now. We have another class coming in at 1 o'clock, so we can take a little bit of a breath here, and then we can reconvene here for anything we want to do for follow-up. Okay? And any questions you guys want to ask, you can ask her off camera and off official interview. So if you're in production, you can call us a wrap, and if not, I'll go do it myself. Katie, thank you.
Dusk to dawn, isn't that